Okay, this is really, we got a little warfare coming here, but there's a reason why. Because I've only been here one time, and it was with Amy and Caiaphas. And I found out why. Because, okay, this is how it works. When we go down to the end here, we're going to go down a huge flight of stairs. Because it's down there where they find the original pavement at the time of Christ. Ronnie told us that they built up. This here isn't 2,000 years old. So we need to pray for our Catholic friends, because they, on this level of today, they've made these churches, and they actually believe that that's where Christ was on the way to the cross. And it ends up at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is inside the gate. But if you read the Bible, okay, it's really clear where it is. Remember when we were at Peter's house, or the high priest's house, where Peter denied the Lord? Okay, now look, here's what it says. Now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him, and having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, "Prophesy, who's the one who struck you?" And many other things they blasphemed and spoke against him. That was in the high priest's house. As soon it was day, the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will by no means believe. And if I also ask you, will you also by no means answer me or let me go? Hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God." Then they all said, "Are you then the Son of God?" And he said to them, "You rightly say that I am." And they said, "What further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth." Then the whole multitude them rose up and led him to Pilate. Okay? So he left the high priest's house, where he was that night, the night before he died. We read Psalms 88, which was a prophetic psalm of the last night of Christ being locked in that prison. Everybody forsook him. And then it says, as soon as it was morning, they led him to Pilate. Okay? Remember, he came into Jerusalem on the 10th day of the month, and he went first to a religious trial with Annas and Caiaphas. And so then from there, they led him to his civil trial with Pontius Pilate and Herod. So on this north side of the Temple Mount was what they called the Antonia Fortress. And that's where the Roman garrison was that would watch and keep track. Because remember, during these three feasts, millions of Jews would come from all over the world. And they would come to the temple. And so it was the Roman Empire. So they had the Antonia Fortress was on the north side, and it was raised up, and it overlooked the Temple Mount. And that's where Pontius Pilate was. And so they led him to Pontius Pilate in the morning, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We find this fellow perverting the nations and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King." Then Peter asked him, saying, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And he answered and says, "It's as you say." So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no fault in this man." But they were more fierce, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all of Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place." And when Pilate heard of the Galilee, he asked the men if he were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he would belong to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at the time. Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod, with his men of the war, treated him with contempt mocked him, arrayed him in purple robe, sent him back to Pilate. And then that very day, Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enemy with each other. Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, he said to them, "You have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I find no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. Nor neither did Herod. For I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him, for it is necessary for him to release one of them at the feast." They all cried out and saying, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city, and for murder." Pilate therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again called out to them, but they shouted, saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Then he said to them the third time, "Why, what evil has he done? And I found no reason for death in him, and I will therefore chastise him and let him go." But they were insistent, demanding with a loud voice that he crucify him. And the voice of these men and the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they requested. And he released to them the one requested, who the rebellion and murder had been thrown into prison, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Now, as they led Jesus away, they laid hold of a certain man of Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. And a great multitude of the people followed him, and women who also mourned and lamented him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For indeed the days are coming, in which they will say, Blessed are the barren woman that never bore, and breasts which never nursed. And then they will begin to say to you, to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in the greenwood, what will they be done in the dry?" There were also two other criminals led with him to be put to death. And then they had come to the place called Calvary. They were crucified him, and the criminals, one on right side, one on the right hand, and one on the other. And Jesus said to them, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided the garments and cast lots. And the people stood looking on. But even the rulers with them sneered, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ, the chosen God." The soldiers also mocked him, coming and offering him sour wine, and saying, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. And in the inscription that was written over him, its letters, and its Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. Then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." But the others answered and rebuked him, saying, "Do not even you fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said to Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "Surely I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Folks, listen. This is the actual stones underneath where we're going to go. Not at this level, but dated back 2,000 years of the Antonia fortress where Jesus received the 39 stripes. We're going to go down, we're going to go to another place, and we're going to read the section of Scripture that talks about him receiving the 39 stripes. After that, Pilate gave in to the crowd, and he said, "Okay, take him out to be crucified." They led him straight down this tunnel outside the Roman gate that's at the Damascus gate. And right across the street, outside the gate, is the very top of Mount Moriah, Calvary, where he was crucified. So